Folks, we talked about this story before. On April 25th, 2021, 19-year-old Derontae Martin was found dead in the attic of a white Missouri man's house with a gunshot wound to the head. The white man, James Wade, is said to be a known white supremacist. Local coroner quickly ruled Derontae's death a suicide. It took months to get a second autopsy, and an impaneled jury ruled Derontae's death resulted from violence, not suicide. But still, 2 years later, no one has been arrested for his death. There are discussions about the DOJ's potentially taking over the case. Katie Ryan is Chief of Staff for Campaign Zero, and she joins us right now. So, Katie, this is strange here. We had the family on before discussing this case, and apparently there was supposedly a party at this man's home. So can you bring folks, those who didn't see us then, bring us today on what the hell happened here? Don't think we have Katie's audio. She might be on mute. So let's, all right, Katie, let's try it now.
Are you able to see and hear me, Roland?
We got you. Actually, we see you and hear you. Go right ahead.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Yes, thank you so much again for using your platform to get this story out and for welcoming us again. And I, spoiler alert, I wish I really had some compelling and exciting and positive news to share about there being movement in this case. We are not there yet. But as a quick refresher for people who have not followed the case of Derontae Martin, you're correct. April 25th, 2021, Derontae, who is a young African-American man, aspiring football star, preparing to go to college to live out his dream of playing football, was taken to a party. So again, this was not a party he intended to attend, but he was taken by some of his friends, acquaintances, we'll call them, in a rural part of Missouri. Derontae was the only Black individual attending the party. The party was for a girl who was a minor at the time, her father known to be a white supremacist. We don't know the full description of what occurred at that party this evening, other than we have the audio of the 911 call in which James Wade is calling the police to alert them that he has discovered Derontae's body shot in the attic of his home. What we do know is that Derontae had surgery on his dominant hand, on his right hand. So he was in a full cast from wrist to elbow. He did die by a gunshot to the temple in the upstairs of this home. And police very quickly took his body from the house. The scene was already cleaned prior to medics arriving. And then his mother, Erica Lotz, had to, by way of sort of telephone, learn both of her son's death and then the whereabouts of his body, which was already at a coroner's.
So that's what's so strange here, the actions of cops in this case. And there literally has been nothing from state investigators.
So as you mentioned earlier, right, the death was ruled a suicide immediately. I believe within 48 hours, the death, Derontae's death was ruled a suicide. So the family had to finance and find a second individual to conduct an autopsy, who very quickly ruled that the death was actually by means of violence, that the distance at which the gun had fired, that it did not appear that it would have even been possible for him to have done this. Based on that, a jury was impaneled, reviewed his case, also said that this was officially a death by violence, not possible for it to be a suicide. One piece of background information is that prior to Derontae's death, there were 2 alleged suicides that had also occurred at James Wade's property. So this is the 3rd death that has occurred at his property. Despite all of this information.
That's a lot of dying.
In one place? Right. Affiliated with one person? Precisely. So what we have seen since then was, since there were conflicting reports after the jury was impaneled and ruled the death homicide, then The investigation was turned over to the Missouri State Highway Patrol. That was to move it out of the local law enforcement. They closed the case and said there was nothing more to examine. So we are still in the streets. We are still pushing for the FBI, for the Department of Justice, for anyone outside of the state of Missouri who can conduct a thorough investigation with integrity that does not have special interest in local politics to actually answer so many of the outstanding questions we have and actually get truth for Derontae and his family.
Have you gotten any sort of feedback from the feds?
No, I will say what's promising is recently the family did meet with Senator Hawley in Missouri, and he has committed to pushing to whatever capacity he has in his office to getting a sort of larger platform. There is an upcoming meeting with Congresswoman Bush. She will be meeting with Derontae's family this week, so we are also hopeful that she'll be able to apply some level of pressure. But we have not been able to get the FBI or the DOJ to publicly commit to actually looking at his case, because as far as we've seen, the investigation has been so botched from top to bottom from the moment of his death. We don't have any more faith in law enforcement and the investigatory bodies in the state of Missouri. Our ask is just at a minimum that we have an external body at the federal level to actually step in and start doing some of this investigating.
Literally a stunning story that makes no sense whatsoever. Rebecca, your first question.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being on here tonight, just to make viewers aware of what's going on. This is a little hard for me because I grew up in a rural state in the Midwest. And I remember family members pulling me aside when I was a teenager and letting me know, do not go to any parties and you're the only Black person there. That was the type of conversation that we had within my family and even my extended family. So my question for you, how often do these things or have these things happen in Missouri that you know of these strange deaths, and no one knows anything? It was a homicide. It may not have been a homicide. It might have been a death by suicide, but then no one knows anything. How often does this happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant question. I don't have a global perspective on how this actually has manifested over time in Missouri. There's no mystery here that our criminal legal system is actually much more quick to stop investigating violent deaths of young Black and brown men in particular. And one of our commitments is to make sure that Derontae doesn't become one of those statistics, right? That it's easily swept under the rug, that, he must have, there were no witnesses there who will actually step forward and actually explain A, why he was there, B, James Wade's actual affiliation with local law enforcement and or his affiliation with any sort of white supremacy groups, and then C, why the coroner and law enforcement were so quick to side with James Wade. This is like one of the saddest tales as old as time, just as you're saying. And part of our scream for justice is that we shouldn't be living in a world where parents have to say, you may not go to a party where you're a minority, because if the outcome is violence, then you will not be a recipient of justice.
Robert?
And so listening to your story, it's just amazing because this isn't isolated. I think to the story of the Black woman who went on the girls' trip and she was the only Black person at the party and she ended up dead. And was also ruled to be a suicide or an accident, something along those lines. I'm curious as to what the Justice Department, why they haven't started investigating this yet. Going through particularly the Civil Rights Division, what are they saying needs to be done in order for them to launch a full investigation?
Yeah, so actually, I think there is, from the DOJ, we're not getting the most clear responses. I'm glad that you're asking this in a very public and vocal way, is that we have only been declined further investigation on behalf of the DOJ, but the actual substantive reason for that is not clear to us. Even clarity that says this is not within the DOJ's purview for X reason would be something, but we are getting sort of stonewalled at every single turn, and that is part of the frustration of this case.
And I'm also reminded of the Ahmaud Arbery case, for example, in South Georgia, where the local prosecutor would have prosecuted and went through three separate prosecutors before the state's attorney stepped in because of the public pressure on it. What has the state's attorney's office, the attorney general of the state, said? Like, what do you think would be necessary in order to get them to at least put some attention on? Because that's the case in Georgia, where we did not get immediate action, but after several months of public pressure, we were able to get the state to step in.
Yeah, I mean, so we have gotten, I wouldn't say stonewall as much by the state's attorney, but we have received a lot of conflicting information, and also have heard that apparently the information that made its way to the state's attorney office was not complete and in full. In fact, we learned that the prosecutor, once he inherited the case file for Derontae, it did not include the fact that a second autopsy had ever been conducted, that it only had information regarding the first and initial autopsy by the local coroner, which to us was just mind-blowing, right? That the state's attorney was only getting a portion of the story and not getting the actual ruling that his death could not have been by suicide. Again, just speaking to the point that at every single turn of the investigation, whether we seek answers or when we ask about the version of stories that people have received, it has been botched from top to bottom.
All right, then. Look, it is unbelievable story, and certainly the family just needs some answers as to what in the hell is actually going on. So great work there, Campaign Zero. We appreciate it. Keep us abreast if you all able to make any movement.
Yes, Roland, and if I can, while we have your viewers who were so engaged previously, I want to remind everyone that we do have a website titled Justice for Derontae, DERONTAE. And on that page, not only can you learn more about him as a human being and the light that he was as a person, but there is a call to action with contact information for the FBI and for the Department of Justice so that you can make your voice be heard and demand that we get some answers and an external investigation.